Yo, what's going on, guys? I'm back. Today, we're gonna be reacting to is this the end of M1? So it's actually been 5 years since 2020, and a lot of things happened in 2020, like the COVID, and Apple releasing their newest model, the M1 chip, for their latest laptop at the time. Now, I'm currently filming using I'm making this video all on a MacBook Air M1 chip, which came out in 2020. Mind you, I got this laptop like 2 years ago, so it's like only 2 years old, but the actual laptop itself came out in 2020. So we're gonna watch if it's still worth it.
Do you want to hear something crazy? The M1 MacBook Air is almost five.
Also, to give context too, I'm also in college and I'm in tech, so I use this for my assignments. And I'm telling you right now, I haven't had any issues, especially with the MacBook only, especially the MacBook Air M1 only having 8 GB of RAM. So
Years old. That is half a
the
decade.
only
And
main
now that
issue is
I've had
storage.
time to use and test, all of these new and exciting MacBook Air versions that have come out almost every year since then, how does the original Apple Silicon MacBook Air stack up in 2025? So I wanted to start with your typical, multitasking and
Mm.
web browsing activities because I think these are the most important things to discuss when talking about a MacBook Air, right? Because these are the things that you're doing 90% of the time on the MacBook. Especially because Intel MacBooks always seemed to slow down over time. You'd get the spinning beach ball of death. You'd notice apps would take longer to load, etc.
Spanish beach
Now, I
ball of
haven't
death. What's
experienced
that?
this with the M1. Bear in mind, I do always reformat the MacBook every 2 to 3 years because if you do experience slowdowns, it's typically due to a software issue. And by reformatting and reinstalling macOS, you can fix that 95% of the time. Now, I can still have tons of tabs open. There's really no difference in performance to the M3 or even the M4. Like right now, I have anywhere from 20 to 30 web browser tabs open in Google Chrome, no less, which is notorious for being a RAM hog. I've also got the Mail app, several Notion pages, Spotify playing in the background.
That's a really good thing about this MacBook, bro, is I can have multiple windows, bro, with my assignments or I'm watching a video or listening to music. I can have multiple windows and I never ever experience issues.
And even a Photoshop project. Now, yes, my memory pressure is in the yellow and I'm using a little bit of swapped memory, a couple of gigabytes, but I'm not experiencing any issues or slowdowns or, spinning beach balls of death. In fact, if I close Photoshop, you can see memory pressure drops right back down to green. And I did find this a little funny that the performance is so good, right? Because a lot of people say that websites and apps, for example, get so much more demanding over time. So you need 16 gigabytes of RAM as an absolute minimum to future proof. And that is just not true at all, as you can see from my daily usage.
Bro, you'll be surprised what you can do with 8 GB of RAM. Like, let me give you a context. So, in some of my classes, these are like my later classes, I have to do VM VMs, which is basically like a virtual machine. So basically, I download Linux, Windows on it, and it ran smooth. And not only that, I was also playing YouTube videos and listening to music while I was running a virtual machine. And virtual machines do take a lot of like RAM storage. So for it to be surviving just on 8 GB RAM is insane, bro. Like I know people sometimes say, "Oh, 16 is better." Obviously, 16 is better because there's more gigabytes of RAM, but you really need 8 realistically. Anything less than 8, then you're probably like it's gonna mess up your machines. But 8 and above, you're good. Like trust me,
Now, for more demanding tasks, I will sometimes compile code
especially
or
with coding.
export heavily edited Lightroom photos. And yeah, look, I can definitely tell a difference versus, say, an M3 or an M4. But the M1 can still get it done, right? It's not like it's just too weak or underpowered to even open the project or complete the render, for example. It just takes longer. And typically, you're not doing super demanding tasks on your MacBook Air anyway. And this kind of leads me into my next point, comparing the brand new latest and greatest M4 to the original M1 and kind of see how they compare and, if anything really major has changed. Now, the M4 is obviously a better and more refined laptop in almost
Hmm.
every way, right? The chassis redesign with the extra ports, better speakers and webcam. One big change I really appreciate though was the addition of the dual monitor support versus the M1, which only supported one
One
external
monitor.
display. But when it
Yeah.
comes down to the core function of a laptop for me, there's really not that much difference between them. Like everyday performance, as I've already mentioned, is almost identical. I mean, I had them both side by side, loading web pages and multitasking, and I could not tell a difference. Portability is the exact same, and actually, a lot of you have commented on how you prefer the M1 chassis because it's more comfortable when resting your palms on it when typing, and I kind of agree. And battery life, again, yeah, the M4 does have the edge because it's brand new versus this one that's 5 years old. And I also did a test where I used all the MacBook Airs for the same amount of time with identical workflows, brightness, settings, etc.
Damn, 9
I
hours.
stopped when the M1 got to 5% versus the M4, which was on 22%. If you convert that to time, the M4 gets about an extra 1.5 to maybe 2 hours more battery life than the M1, which already has like over 10 hours to begin with. Now, the only significant major difference is
Bro, but like if you're on this laptop, bro, I guarantee you you're getting like 10 hours on it. Like 10 hours on it, bro. Especially if you're just watching YouTube videos, whatever. 10 hours. 10 hours even more, honestly. Especially my model. I don't really notice that my batteries are dying. Especially if I'm making like videos and stuff or doing extra stuff, then yeah, it might be less, but it will definitely won't be less than like 9 hours for at least for me.
between them are, again, doing those more intense tasks that most people really don't do anyway on a MacBook Air. I've honestly just been amazed at how well the M1 Air is keeping up here, right? Like, you just didn't really get this with the previous Intel versions, and going back to the M1 over the last few weeks has really made me think about, what do I need from a laptop? What's the core function? Battery life, portability, everyday performance, and those factors, the difference just is not that big. A really good example of this is the Touch ID feature. It has not evolved or improved at all in nearly 5 years on the MacBook Air because it just worked well from the very beginning, and that goes for all the other factors I mentioned too. Now, speaking of Touch ID, it's obviously nice to unlock your Mac with a fingerprint, but a lot of people have been wanting something hands-free like Face ID instead. Now, that might be a few years away on the MacBook Air, but how about unlocking your front door by using the veins in your palm? This is the Vino about the Vino Pro Smart Lock down in the description below. Now, I mentioned swap memory earlier in this video, and do you remember the big controversy in 2021 where the base model 256GB SSD would supposedly fail within like 1 to 2 years from too much data being written to it? Well, a few users reported back in late 2020 and early 2021 that their M1 MacBook Air was writing a ton of data every day to the SSD via something called swap memory, aka
Swap
when
memory.
there's no more RAM available. So macOS actually uses the SSD to write those temporary files to that would otherwise be stored in RAM. Now, some people were quick to point out that even if this was not an issue, the 256GB SSD
It says 256, but realistically it's 245 because that extra, I don't know where that extra the other 11 gigabytes of RAM go. I mean gigabytes of RAM. I don't know where the other 11 gigabytes of SSD storage goes because when you check on your device, even here you can clearly see it's 245, not
indeed.
256. The main issues that I've done, especially when I make videos, because each video on OBS when it converts to an actual like MP file, there's like two files. There's a MLK file and then an MP file. It automatically converts the MLK file to the MP3 file. Those two are like the same storage, which is especially with my new OBS settings, it's roughly like depending on how long the video is, if it's like between 15 to 20, it'll probably be about 5 gigabytes of storage on each the MLK and MVP file. So I started sometimes I don't immediately delete the files after I upload a video, so I kind of just keep it there, and it really does eat up my storage because I make a lot of videos. I record almost every single day, and also sometimes I need to edit videos on iMovie, so I also transfer that file to iMovie, and obviously that doubles the storage, triples the storage actually, and yeah, storage goes up by really fast. I'm not gonna lie to you. 245 gigabytes of SSD is honestly not enough, but it's not a deal breaker because obviously you just delete your old videos and then you have way more storage.
Base model MacBook Air is still a really small SSD in terms of capacity, which means it should
And the
theoretically
reason why they do this, the reason why the Airs have a maximum of 256 gigabytes of SSD is because Apple wants you to buy the more expensive models that have way more storage, like the Pro models. Because if the Air had the same amount of storage, like 500 gigabytes or 1 terabyte, as a Pro model, what really is the point of getting a Pro model at that point? Especially
they
since their chips are the same.
feel much faster than, say, a larger 512 gigabyte or 1 terabyte SSD. Almost 5 years later, though, yeah, still works perfectly fine. Now, I recently spent a few hours trawling the internet to try to find examples of failed SSDs, and I just couldn't find anything widespread. It
I
just
haven't
looks
heard
like
about any
all of the
failed
activity
SSDs.
on the topic died down very quickly after that initial hype. Now, typically, if there is an issue with the SSD, it will fail either at the very beginning or within a year or two, like relatively quickly, right? And now that we are almost 5 years on with no significant or widespread issues, I really think it's safe to say there's nothing wrong with it. Now, one thing I have noticed is the battery life. By now, as I said before, these M1 MacBook Airs are getting on for 3 to 5 years old, depending when it was first brand new. Now, battery life is still fine. I'm still getting close to 10 hours on mine. But you need to understand that every battery has a lifespan. There are a number of factors that contribute to that lifespan, like the type of battery, exactly how it's used, and if it's kept in harsh conditions, like a really warm room constantly, for example. If you look at the documentation for MacBooks on Apple's website, you'll see that Apple talks about battery cycle counts,
Mm.
aka how many times the battery has been charged to 100% and then discharged to 0%. That's one cycle. Sometimes it takes 2 to 3 charges to add up to one cycle in total. Like, for example, if you charge from 50% to 100% and then do it again the next day, that is still one cycle. Now, most modern MacBook batteries are rated for 1,000 charge cycles until the total battery capacity is reduced to around 80%. So what that means is you will start to notice the battery life is not as good as it used to be, like I am right now. Maybe you'll only get 8 hours of battery life instead of the 10 you used to get, for example. And in my experience, on average, most people go through, a full battery cycle about every 1.5 days. So roughly 230 per year. And then 5 years of that is roughly somewhere over 1,000 cycles, which means now is kind of the point where we're going to see M1 MacBook Air batteries start to get consumed.
That's why. That's why you get Apple Care because they'll they'll swap out your battery for free if you have Apple Care. Obviously, it's like $200 for like the 2 years. I'm pretty sure, but I'm pretty sure you could just swipe it after like 2 years, and then you should be good. Honestly, the better thing isn't a huge issue, but I only had it for 2 years, so I literally got it in summer 2023. My MacBook Air, and I'll be honest, like I said, I'm a tech student. I do all my assignments on it. I watch videos, I edit videos, I do videos, I make TikToks, everything. I have a bunch of tabs open. I watch movies on it. And for me, I never had any issues with the device. The only issue I have, like I said, was the SSD storage. That's the only thing. Cause just mind you, if you're a content creator, delete your old files, your old videos.
We're going to start getting over that 80% threshold, which is also not a huge issue in my opinion because battery replacements aren't that expensive. And if you've already gotten a good 5 years of daily use out of it, I think that's actually an okay deal. I also just want to have a quick chat about the future of the M1 MacBook Air. Honestly, I don't think it's going to change that much. Like, it's already been 5 years, but one thing I am a little unsure about is how long Apple is going to
To update,
support it. Now,
support it, yeah.
traditionally, Apple stops supporting MacBooks after about 7 years. The MacBook will still work, it just means that it won't be able to update to the latest version of macOS. And that kind of worries me a bit because I've noticed more and more certain apps won't let you download them from the App Store unless you're on a certain
That's why, for me, when it gets to that point, I'm changing the whole OS. Though I'm deleting Mac OS on my MacBook, and I'm changing the whole operating system to Linux, because Linux runs really good on Macs, apparently. So don't quote me on that.
somewhat recent version of macOS. Now, I have an M2 MacBook Air that has a motherboard issue, so it won't let me upgrade the macOS version. So it's stuck on macOS Monterey, which is roughly 2022 era software. Now, there are several apps I've tried to download and install on it, and it's just not supported because of the out-of-date operating system. And that is, unfortunately, what's going to happen to the M1 eventually when Apple stops supporting it. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. It just
When?
depends on exactly when Apple pulls that trigger. It could be in 2 years' time, which is 7 years total from when the M1 MacBook Air was released in 2020, but it could be longer than that. We don't really know exactly what Apple's going to do. But whatever happens, it really does just make me a little bit sad, because even if in another 5 years, for example, the M1 is still just as capable as it is now, it just won't be a viable option. Like, yeah, you can buy it, but you probably won't be able to install half the software you want on it. But yeah, overall, I'm really impressed with how well this machine has held up over the last 5 years. When I first started making videos on the M1 MacBook Air back in late 2020, shout out to all of you OGs who've been watching since then, I did not expect to be sitting here, almost 5 years later in 2025 and saying, you know what, we've got all these amazing MacBooks out there, the M3 Air, the M4 Air. The M1 Air is really comparable in a lot of areas to this, recent M4 MacBook Air, for example. There's really not that much difference, and that is honestly amazing to me. And I see a lot of comments from you guys down in the comment section on Reddit, etc., just saying that your MacBook Air has not missed a beat for the last 5 years, and you have absolutely no intention of upgrading for potentially the next 5 years as well. So,
Bro, I'm telling y'all, the best. Look, Apple is known for making the best quality product, especially in their laptops. Just look at the MacBook Air. It's an M1 MacBook Air, 256 gigabytes of SSD, 8 gigabytes of RAM, and it after 5 years later, it performs crazy. It still performs and can do anything you put at it, and it won't have any issues. There might be some little latencies, but nothing too drastic or major. That M1 chip really helps it. And I'll be honest, if you're looking for a good budget laptop, then you can't go wrong with the MacBook Air M1 chip. You cannot go wrong with it. Trust me. If you're just getting into computers and you just want to get a laptop, especially if you're just getting into college, buy a MacBook Air M1 chip and you'll thank yourself later. Or try to get a Pro, a M1 Pro. If you got an M1 Pro, then you're chilling.
if that is you, if you do own an M1 MacBook Air, leave a comment down below. Tell me about your experience. I would love to read it. Apart from that, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.
Well, comment down below what y'all like, what you didn't like with the video, and what y'all want me to react to next. And I'll catch y'all in the next one. Peace.